Captain Ji-won Kim stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Fleet carrier Indomitable, staring at the screen before her. The image showed what remained of New Busan Colony. Where there had been homes and schools and parks just 6 hours ago, there was now only fire and smoke and broken metal. 12,000 people had lived there. 12,000 people who woke up that morning thinking about their jobs and their families and what they would have for dinner. Now they were gone. All of them. The Rexian fleet had made sure of that. "Captain," Hyun Lee said from the communication station. His voice was quiet, controlled, but Ji-won could hear the anger underneath. "Admiral Choi is on the line." Ji-won pressed the button. "This is Kim. I'm here, Admiral." Admiral Yuna Choi's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. She looked old. Ji-won had known Yuna for 15 years and she had never seen her look like this before. "Ji-won," Yuna said, "I know what you want to do. I know what your crew wants to do. But Earth Command is ordering you to hold position." "Hold position?" Ji-won felt her hands tighten into fists. "Admiral, the Vrexian fleet is right there. We can engage them now. We can make them pay for what they did." "I know," Yuna said softly. "But Ambassador Park is trying to solve this peacefully. The government wants to give diplomacy a chance." Ji-won looked back at the screen showing New Busan, at the fires still burning, at the wreckage of homes and lives. "Diplomacy," she said. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. "Captain, I understand your feelings. I share them. But we have our orders. Hold position and wait." The screen went dark. Ji-won stood there for a long moment, not moving. Around her, the bridge crew worked in silence. Everyone had seen what happened to New Busan. Everyone wanted to do something about it. "Captain," Hyun said. "What are our orders?" Ji-won took a deep breath. "We hold position. We wait." She could feel the disappointment spreading across the bridge like a wave. But orders were orders. That was how Earth worked. That was how they had worked for 47 years in space, ever since they joined the Galactic Council and met the other species among the stars. 47 years of being polite. 47 years of compromise and negotiation and careful diplomacy. 47 years of proving that humanity could be trusted, that they were civilized, that they deserved a place in the greater galaxy. And now the Vrexians thought that made them weak. Far away. On Earth, Ambassador Min-ho Park sat in his office preparing for what might be the most important speech of his life. In 2 hours, he would stand before the Galactic Council and ask them to intervene. He would ask them to make the Vrexians stop. He would ask for justice for New Busan. He knew they would probably say no. The Galactic Council was made of over 200 species. Some were old and powerful. Some were new and weak. Most were somewhere in between. They made decisions slowly, carefully, always worried about upsetting the balance of power. And the Vrexian Empire was powerful. They controlled 43 star systems. They had the third largest fleet in the galaxy. They had been part of the Council for over 600 years. Earth had been part of the Council for only 47 years. In galactic terms, humanity was still a baby, still learning, still trying to find their place. The Vrexians knew this. That was why they attacked. Minho had been trying to negotiate with them for 3 months, ever since the Vrexians started moving fleets toward human space, claiming that certain territories belonged to them based on ancient maps and old treaties. Minho had offered compromises. He had offered trade agreements and shared resources. He had offered everything he could think of to avoid conflict. The Vrexians had taken his offers as proof that humans were cowards. Minho looked at the speech he had written. It was full of careful language and diplomatic phrases. It talked about unfortunate incidents and the need for peaceful resolution and finding common ground. He crumpled it up and threw it away. Then he started writing a new speech. On the Indomitable, the crew waited. They watched the Vrexian fleet through their sensors. 3 battleships, 8 cruisers, 20 smaller vessels. The aliens weren't even trying to hide. They sat there in space right near New Busan as if daring Earth to do something about it. "They're broadcasting a message," Hyun said. "Do you want to hear it?" Ji-won nodded. A Vrexian voice filled the bridge. The translation software made it sound cold and mechanical. "This is Fleet Commander Vrexus of the Vrexian Empire. New Busan was built on territory that belongs to us. We have reclaimed what is ours. If Earth attempts to retaliate, we will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly. If Earth has other colonies in Vrexian territory, we advise evacuating them immediately. We will reclaim those as well. The message ended. Vrexian territory, one of the bridge officers muttered. New Busan was founded 80 years ago. There was nothing there but empty planets. Doesn't matter, another officer said. They have old maps that say it belonged to their ancestors. The council considers that a valid claim. Jiwon said nothing. She kept watching the Vrexian fleet. She kept thinking about 12,000 people who would never go home again. Her communicator buzzed. It was a text message from Yuna Choi. Just 3 words. I'm sorry, Jiwon. Jiwon understood. Yuna was military. She was a warrior. But she had to follow orders from the civilian government. And the civilian government was still trying to solve this peacefully, because that was what Earth did. That was what Earth had always done, ever since joining the galaxy. They negotiated. They compromised. They found peaceful solutions. The other species saw this as weakness. They didn't understand that it was a choice, a deliberate, difficult choice that humanity made every single day. On Earth, in the government assembly, the debate raged for hours. Some leaders wanted to negotiate more. Some wanted to give the Vrexians whatever they asked for to avoid more deaths. Some wanted to pull all human colonies back to safer space. General Sun Mi Han stood up to speak. She was old now, in her 70s, but her voice was still strong. I've been studying the Vrexians, she said. I've been studying all the species in the council. And I've learned something important. The room grew quiet. None of them understand war, Sun Mi said. Not the way we do. When they fight, it's small battles between fleets. They have rules. They have limits. They fight until one side gives up and then they negotiate. That's what they think war is. She paused, looking around the room. They don't know what total war means. They don't know what happens when a species decides that nothing matters except winning. They've never faced an enemy that would burn everything to win. They've never been that enemy themselves. What are you saying, General? Someone asked. I'm saying that we've been polite for 47 years. We've been good neighbors. We've followed their rules and played their games. And the Vrexians think that means we can't fight. That means we won't fight. Sunmi's eyes were hard. They're wrong. And if they attack another human colony, I think we should show them exactly how wrong they are. The debate continued, but something had changed in the room. Something had shifted. On the Indomitable, Jiwon received a new message. It was from Earth Command, marked urgent. All fleet commanders are to stand by for possible new orders within the next 24 hours. Maintain readiness status. Prepare all weapon systems. Await confirmation. Jiwon read the message twice. Then she looked up at her crew. You heard the Admiral earlier. We're still holding position, but I want all crews at battle stations. I want every weapon system checked and rechecked. I want this ship ready to fight at a moment's notice. The bridge came alive with activity. Finally, they had something to do besides watch and wait. Jiwon looked back at the screen showing New Busan, at the fires still burning in the wreckage. Soon, she whispered. Soon. Ambassador Minho Park stood before the Galactic Council. 200 species represented by beings of every imaginable shape and size filled the vast chamber. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in specialized environmental suits. A few appeared only as holographic projections because their biology couldn't survive in standard atmosphere. All of them were watching him. Honored members of the council, Minho began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. 3 days ago, the Vrexian Empire attacked the human colony of New Busan without warning or provocation. 12,000 civilians died. Men, women, and children who had committed no crime except living on a planet that the Vrexians suddenly decided belonged to them. He paused, letting his words sink in. I come before you today to ask for justice. I ask the Council to condemn this attack. I ask for sanctions against the Vrexian Empire until they provide compensation for the lives lost and guarantee that such attacks will not happen again. The chamber filled with the sounds of translation, devices, and whispered conversations. Minho could see some species nodding in what might be sympathy. Others looked uncomfortable. Many looked away. The council speaker, a being called Thex whose species resembled a large insect, raised one of its many limbs for silence. The council hears the human ambassador's petition, Thex said in its clicking, translated voice. Does the Vrexian Empire wish to respond? A Vrexian representative stood. He was tall, covered in scales that reflected the chamber's light, with 4 arms and a crest of spines running down his back. The human ambassador speaks of an attack, the Vrexian said. This is inaccurate. The Vrexian Empire simply reclaimed territory that rightfully belongs to us. We have ancient maps showing that this region of space has been ours for 3,000 years. The humans built their colony without permission. We checked the territorial records before establishing New Busan, Minho said, fighting to keep his voice calm. That region was listed as unclaimed space. No one lived there. No one had lived there for thousands of years. Irrelevant, the Vrexian replied. It was still Vrexian territory. And I must point out that the Council's own laws support our claim. Ancient territorial rights are recognized as valid. Thex consulted with other council members. The discussion went on for nearly an hour. Minho stood there, waiting, watching. Finally, Thex spoke. The council finds that while the Vrexian Empire's methods were regrettable, their territorial claim has basis in recognized law. Therefore, the council declines to issue sanctions. However, we strongly encourage both parties to negotiate a peaceful settlement. Minho felt something cold settle in his stomach. Regrettable? He said quietly. 12,000 people died and you call it regrettable? Ambassador Park, Thex said, its tone patient. We understand your emotion. But the council must follow established law. We suggest you negotiate with the Vrexian Empire to prevent future incidents. Minho looked around the chamber. Some species looked sympathetic but did nothing. Others seemed relieved that the matter was resolved. The Vrexian representatives were practically radiating satisfaction. I see, Minho said. Thank you for your time, Council. He left the chamber. Behind him, the Council moved on to other business. On the other side of the galaxy, in a small research station, an alien named Daehyun Ko was having trouble sleeping. Daehyun was a historian who specialized in studying developing species. His own people, the Kelthans, had been peaceful scholars for as long as anyone could remember. Daehyun had been following the situation with Earth and the Vrexians with professional interest. He found it curious that the humans were being so passive. Most species, when attacked, would immediately fight back, but the humans just kept trying to negotiate. It made him wonder about humanity's history. The thing was, nobody really studied human history. When Earth joined the Galactic Council 47 years ago, the Council had done the standard review, checked that humans were intelligent, that they had basic technology, that they understood the concept of diplomacy. Once those boxes were checked, Earth was accepted as a Tier 3 species and everyone moved on. But Daehyun was curious by nature, and he had access to Earth's public historical databases. He started reading. At first, it was just interesting. Humans had developed on a single planet like most species. They had slowly built civilizations, discovered science, invented space travel, all very standard. But then Daehyun started noticing something strange. The words that kept appearing in Earth's historical records. War, battle, conflict, invasion, conquest, massacre. War. Humans used that word a lot. Daehyun knew about war, of course. Most species fought occasionally. Usually it was small battles between ships or brief conflicts over resources. These wars might last a few months, maybe a year or two at most. A few hundred casualties was considered tragic. A few thousand was considered a major disaster. But human history, Daehyun read about something called World War I, a conflict that lasted 4 years and killed 17 million people. 17 million. The number seemed impossible. Then he read about World War II, which happened just 21 years later. That one killed over 70 million people. Daehyun sat back from his computer, his breathing fast. These numbers couldn't be real. No species could survive losing that many members. The entire Kelthan population was only 40 million across all their worlds. He kept reading. He learned about nuclear weapons. Bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Bombs that left radiation that made land uninhabitable for generations. The humans had built thousands of these weapons and pointed them at each other for decades in something called the Cold War. He learned about a concept called mutually assured destruction. The idea that if one nation launched nuclear weapons, the enemy would launch theirs in response and everyone would die. And the humans had lived with this threat hanging over them for 50 years. He learned about chemical weapons. Biological weapons. Weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. He learned that humans had been fighting wars, constantly, for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts, constant war. For 10,000 years, Daehyun felt sick, but he kept reading because he needed to understand. He needed to know why the humans had stopped fighting. What had changed? The answer, he finally realized, was nothing. Humans hadn't stopped being good at war. They had just gotten tired of it. After thousands of years of killing each other, after developing weapons that could destroy their entire planet, they had made a choice. They had chosen to try peace instead. It wasn't that they couldn't fight. It was that they had decided not to. When humans reached the stars and found other species, they made another choice. They would try to fit in. They would follow the rules. They would be diplomatic and patient and peaceful, because they knew what the alternative looked like. Daehyun started writing a report. He tried to explain what he had learned. He tried to convey the danger he now understood. The humans weren't weak. They were possibly the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they had been choosing not to show it. He sent his report to the Vrexian Military Command. He sent it to the Council. He sent it to anyone he thought might listen. Most people ignored it. Some laughed. One Vrexian commander sent back a message saying, "If the humans were really dangerous, they would have fought back by now. Your concerns are noted but dismissed." Daehyun tried again. He compiled more data. He created detailed analysis. He showed how human military technology was decades ahead of standard council technology. Even though humans had only been in space for a short time, nobody listened. On the Indomitable, Captain Jiwon Kim received news that made her blood boil. The Vrexians had attacked again. 2 more colonies hit simultaneously, 4,000 more people dead, and still Earth Command ordered them to hold position. "Captain," Hyun Lee said, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the colonies. They're asking why we're not helping. They're asking why we're just sitting here." Jiwon closed her eyes. Tell them we're following orders. Tell them Earth Command is working on a solution." But she knew how hollow those words sounded. On Earth, the government assembly met in emergency session. The debate was shorter this time. The voices calling for restraint were quieter now. General Sun Mi-han spoke again. "The Vrexians have attacked 3 colonies. They've killed 16,000 of our people. They've publicly stated they will continue attacking until we withdraw from their territory, which includes 40% of our colonies." She looked around the room. "The Galactic Council won't help us. They've made that clear. The Vrexians think we're weak. They think our patience means we can't fight back. What do you propose?" the Prime Minister asked. Sunmi pulled up a holographic display. It showed Earth's full military capability. Ships, weapons, soldiers, technology that had been developed over decades but never used. "I propose we show them what humanity really is," Sunmi said. "I propose we stop pretending to be something we're not. I propose we fight." The room erupted in discussion. Some agreed. Others argued for more negotiation. The debate raged for hours. Finally, the Prime Minister called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Ambassador Minho Park stood in his office, composing a message. Not to the Galactic Council this time. Directly to the Vrexian Empire. The message was short, simple, direct. The Vrexian fleet commander was laughing when the first missiles hit his flagship. He had been reading Earth's message again, sharing it with his officers, making jokes about human weakness. Then the alarm started screaming. His tactical display lit up with more contacts than seemed possible. "Report," he shouted. "Multiple human fleets emerging from jump space," his tactical officer said, his voice rising in panic. "They're everywhere, surrounding all our positions. I'm counting over 300 human vessels." 300? The commander stared at his display. "That's their entire fleet. They've committed everything. Sir, they're launching missiles. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. I've never seen such concentration of firepower." The commander opened his mouth to give orders, but then the missiles arrived. Human missiles weren't like anything used in normal galactic warfare. Standard Council weapons were clean and precise. They targeted specific systems on enemy ships, engines, weapons, life support. The goal was to disable, not destroy. Human missiles were different. They were designed for one purpose: complete annihilation. The Vrexian flagship shook as dozens of warheads struck its hull. The shields that normally deflected standard weapons overloaded in seconds. The armor that usually held against energy beams melted and tore. Explosions ripped through deck after deck. The commander had just enough time to realize he had made a terrible mistake. Then his ship broke apart around him. On the Indomitable, Captain Ji-won Kim watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. For 3 days she had been forced to wait. 3 days of watching Vrexian forces celebrate their attacks on human colonies. 3 days of holding back while her people died. Now the gloves were off. All wings maintain formation, she ordered. Focus fire on their capital ships first. I want their command structure eliminated before they can organize a response. Yes, Captain, her tactical officer responded. Wing 7 reports 3 Vrexian battleships destroyed. Wing 3 has eliminated 2 cruiser groups. Wing 12 is engaging their support vessels. Ji-won nodded. The battle plan was working perfectly. Admiral Yuna Choi had spent the last 3 days preparing this operation. She had called it Operation Prometheus after the human myth about bringing fire to mankind. The Vrexians were certainly getting fire now. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Vrexian fleet, Hyan Lee said. They're asking us to cease fire. They want to negotiate. Tell them no, Ji-won said simply. Tell them we tried negotiating. That time is over. The battle that followed would be studied for generations, not because it was long or complicated, but because of how completely it demonstrated the difference between humanity and everyone else. The Vrexians fought using standard galactic tactics. Their ships moved in careful formations. They targeted specific systems on enemy vessels. They tried to disable rather than destroy. When ships were damaged, they withdrew to repair. This was how war worked in the galaxy. This was civilized. The humans had a different approach. Human ships moved in 3 dimensions constantly, using patterns of attack that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely coordinated. They struck from above and below simultaneously. They used electronic warfare to blind enemy sensors. They deployed fighters in swarms that overwhelmed point defense systems, and they didn't try to disable enemy ships. They destroyed them. Commander Taeyang Shin led one of the special operations teams that Earth had never told the galaxy about. His team's job was boarding actions. When a Vrexian ship was disabled but not destroyed, they would go in and finish the job. The Vrexians had never seen anything like it. Breach in 30 seconds, Taeyang said to his team. They were in their armor, carrying weapons designed for close combat in confined spaces. Weapons that the Galactic Council had actually banned because they were considered too brutal. The Council believed wars should be fought at distance, clean, civilized. Nobody actually closed with the enemy and fought face-to-face anymore. That was barbaric. Taeyang's team hit the breach at full speed. They moved through the Vrexian ship like a knife through flesh. The Vrexians tried to resist, but they had no training for this kind of combat. Their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship warfare, not fighting in corridors. Within 20 minutes, the ship was secured. Taeyang reported back to Fleet Command. Another one down, he said, moving to the next target. In space above New Busan, pilot Minji Bei led her fighter squadron in a strike against Vrexian support vessels. Minji was young, barely 25, but she had been training for combat since she was 16. Not because Earth expected war, because Earth never forgot that war was possible. Her squadron hit the Vrexian ships in waves. The enemy tried to respond, but their defense systems couldn't track the human fighters. They were too fast, too agile, moving in patterns that made no sense to alien sensors. Red 3, take out those shield generators, Minji ordered. Red 5 and 6, cover her approach. Red 2, you're with me on the engines. The coordination was perfect. The Vrexians didn't have a chance. Within 6 hours of the first attack, the Vrexian forces in human space had been reduced by 40%. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed. On Earth, Admiral Yuna Choi monitored the battle from Strategic Command. She felt no joy in what she was watching, only grim necessity. Next to her, General Sun Mi-han was compiling damage reports. Human casualties? Yuna asked. Remarkably light, Sun-Mi replied. We've lost 11 ships. About 400 personnel. The Vrexians have lost over 80 ships and at least 50,000 people. The disparity was shocking, but not surprising to anyone who understood how humans fought. Phase 2, Yuna said. Begin pursuit. I don't want any Vrexian military vessels leaving human space intact. Drive them back to their own territory. Yes, Admiral. Sun-Mi hesitated. Admiral, we're receiving multiple messages from the Galactic Council. They're demanding we cease fire immediately. They're calling this excessive force. They're saying we're violating the rules of civilized warfare. Yuna's expression hardened. Tell the council that we asked for their help. They declined. Tell them we're not interested in their rules anymore. Not after what the Vrexians did. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Species that had dismissed Earth as weak and unimportant were suddenly watching in horror as humanity demonstrated what they were really capable of. Historian Daehyun Ko sat in his research station, watching the battle reports come in. He felt sick, not because he was surprised, but because he had tried to warn everyone and nobody had listened. He pulled up his report on human military history. He sent it out again, this time with a new title, We Woke the Dragon, Why the Vrexian Empire Has Already Lost. This time, people read it. On a Vrexian military command ship deep in their own territory, Fleet Admiral Vrexus watched the reports with growing dread. He had authorized the attacks on human colonies. He had dismissed the warnings about human capabilities. He had believed that humans were weak. Now he was watching the Vrexian Empire's proud fleet being torn apart. How are they doing this? He asked his tactical officer. How are they so effective? They're using tactics we've never seen before, Admiral, the officer replied. Combined arms warfare. Overwhelming force. They're not trying to win battles. They're trying to completely destroy our ability to fight back. This isn't civilized, Vrexus said. No, sir, the officer agreed. This is something else. This is total war, a concept that didn't exist in galactic military doctrine. The idea that you didn't fight to gain advantage or territory. You fought to utterly destroy your enemy's capacity to resist. The humans had learned this concept through thousands of years of fighting each other. They had learned it in blood and fire and pain. They had learned it so well that they had finally decided to stop doing it, but they hadn't forgotten how. Captain Ji-won Kim stood on her bridge, watching another Vrexian formation break apart under human assault. She thought about New Busan, about the 12,000 people who had died there, about the 4,000 more who had died in the subsequent attacks. Captain, Hyun said, the Vrexian commander is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's offering complete surrender. He says they'll withdraw from all human territory immediately. Ji-won looked at her tactical display. The Vrexian forces were retreating in disorder. They had lost nearly half their fleet. The rest were running. Tell them we accept their withdrawal from human space, Ji-won said. But tell them the war isn't over. Not yet, ma'am. Admiral Choi's orders are clear. We're not stopping at our borders. We're going after them. We're going to make sure they never attack human colonies again. Around the bridge, her crew nodded in agreement. They had been forced to watch their people die. Now they were making sure it would never happen again. The human fleet began moving forward, pursuing the retreating Vrexians. Behind them, the wreckage of the Vrexian invasion force drifted in space. A monument to what happened when you mistook patience for weakness. The galaxy watched and learned a new lesson. Humanity had been polite for 47 years. But politeness had always been a choice, and humanity had just chosen differently. The human fleet crossed into Vrexian territory without slowing down. Fleet Admiral Vrexus watched the sensor displays in disbelief. They're not stopping, he said. They drove us out of human space, and they're still coming. Sir, we're receiving a message from Earth Command, his communications officer said. It's a list of demands. Vrexus read the message and felt his blood run cold. The humans weren't just pushing them back. They weren't satisfied with defending their territory. They wanted complete surrender. The demands were simple and brutal. Total disarmament of the Vrexian military. War reparations for every human death. Surrender of all commanders who authorized attacks on human colonies for trial. And permanent monitoring stations in Vrexian space to ensure compliance. This is outrageous, Vrexus said. They can't make these demands. The Galactic Council won't allow it. Sir, the communications officer said quietly, the Council is demanding we accept Earth's terms. They're saying if we don't, they won't intervene on our behalf. Vrexus stared at him. What? Multiple Council members are refusing to support us, sir. They're saying we started this war. They're saying they warned us about pushing humanity too far. Vrexus wanted to laugh at the irony. The Council had done nothing when the Vrexians attacked human colonies. Now they were abandoning the Vrexian Empire because humanity was winning. Captain Ji-won Kim's fleet struck at Vrexian military installations with surgical precision. They weren't attacking civilian targets. They weren't destroying cities. But every shipyard, every military base, every weapons factory was being systematically eliminated. Target destroyed, her tactical officer reported. That's the last major shipyard in this sector. Jiwon nodded. Move to the next target. I want their ability to build new military vessels completely removed. On Earth, Ambassador Minho Park stood before the Galactic Council once again. The chamber that had been so dismissive 2 weeks ago was now completely silent as he spoke. 2 weeks ago I stood here and asked for your help, Minho said. I asked for justice for 12,000 dead humans. You told me to negotiate. You told me that the Vrexian territorial claim had basis in law. You told me to be patient. He paused, looking around the chamber. So we stopped asking for your help. We stopped being patient. We stopped pretending that your rules applied to us when you weren't willing to enforce those rules fairly. Thex, the council speaker, shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Park, the council acknowledges that the Vrexian attacks were regrettable. But your response has been excessive. You've destroyed half their fleet. You're attacking their territory. This goes beyond defense, does it? Minho asked. Because from Earth's perspective, this is exactly what defense requires. The Vrexians attacked us because they thought we were weak. They thought our patience meant we couldn't fight back. We're making sure they never make that mistake again. But surely now that they're retreating, Thex began. Retreating isn't enough, Minho interrupted. An enemy that retreats can always come back. We're making sure that when this is over, the Vrexian Empire won't have the capability to threaten anyone again. A representative from one of the older council species stood up. Ambassador, your actions are setting a dangerous precedent. If every species responds to conflict with such overwhelming force, then maybe species will think twice before attacking each other, Minho finished. With respect, Counselor, your system of civilized warfare doesn't work. It allows strong species to bully weak ones because everyone knows the fights will be limited. Well, humanity doesn't fight limited wars. We never have. And now you know that. Admiral Yuna Choi received reports from across Vrexian space. The campaign was going faster than expected. Vrexian resistance was collapsing not because their forces couldn't fight, but because their commanders were surrendering rather than face complete destruction. Admiral, we're receiving multiple offers of surrender from Vrexian regional commanders, General Sun Mi-han reported. They're asking for terms. Tell them the terms are the same as we sent to their fleet, Admiral, Yuna said. Complete disarmament, reparations, surrender of war criminals, no negotiations. Some of them are saying those terms are too harsh. They're saying their government will never accept them. Yuna looked at the tactical display showing Vrexian territory. Then we'll keep destroying their military capability until their government has no choice but to accept. It was cold. It was brutal. But Yuna had learned from history. When you fought a war, you fought to win. You fought to make sure the enemy couldn't come back for revenge. You fought to ensure lasting peace through overwhelming victory. Half measures only guaranteed future wars. Commander Taiyang Shin's team was inserting into a Vrexian military research facility. Intelligence suggested they were developing new weapons there. Weapons that might have been used against Earth if the war had continued. Remember, Taiyang said to his team, no civilian casualties. This is a military target only. Clear every room, secure all research data, then set demolition charges. The operation went smoothly. The Vrexian military personnel surrendered quickly once they realized they were facing human special forces. The research data was secured and sent back to Earth Command. What they found in that data made everyone pause. The Vrexians had been planning a full invasion of Earth itself, not just attacking colonies. They had been developing biological weapons, specifically designed to target human biology. They had been planning to strike at Earth's population centers. When Taiyang reported this finding, Admiral Yuna Choi's response was immediate. Send that data to the Galactic Council. I want every species to see what the Vrexians were planning. The revelation changed everything. The council members who had been calling for restraint went silent. Even the species most sympathetic to the Vrexian Empire couldn't defend plans for biological warfare against civilians. Ambassador Minho received messages from dozens of council species. Some were apologizing for not taking Earth's concerns seriously. Others were asking if Earth needed assistance. A few were asking if Earth would be willing to help them with their own security concerns. The galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted completely in 2 weeks. On a Vrexian world far from the fighting, Emperor Vrexus IV sat in his palace and faced the reality of what his empire had become. His fleet was broken. His military installations were destroyed. His commanders were either dead, captured, or surrendering as fast as they could, and the humans were still coming. His military advisors had told him the humans would be easy to defeat. They said humanity was weak, that they had been peaceful for too long to remember how to fight. His advisors had been catastrophically wrong. Now Earth's demands sat on his desk. Complete surrender, disarmament, reparations, war crimes trials. If he accepted, the Vrexian Empire would become a shadow of its former self. They would never again be a major galactic power. If he didn't accept, the humans would keep destroying everything until he had no choice. Contact the human fleet, he told his aide. Tell them I'm prepared to discuss terms. When Captain Ji-won Kim received the message that the Vrexian Emperor wanted to negotiate, she felt no joy. Only tired satisfaction. Forward the message to Admiral Choi, she told Hyun, but maintain combat readiness. We don't stand down until we have a signed agreement. Around her, the bridge crew nodded. They had learned to trust their captain's caution. 3 days later, the agreement was signed. The Vrexian Empire agreed to all of Earth's demands. Their military would be reduced to a small defensive force. They would pay reparations for 50 years. The commanders responsible for attacking human colonies would face justice. Human monitoring stations would be established throughout Vrexian space to ensure compliance. When the news reached Earth, there were no celebrations. Too many people had died for this victory to feel good, but there was satisfaction. The Vrexians would never threaten human colonies again. Admiral Yuna Choi addressed the fleet. You all performed magnificently, she said. You showed the galaxy that humanity isn't weak, that our patience isn't cowardice, that our preference for peace doesn't mean we can't fight. She paused. But remember this. We didn't fight this war because we wanted to. We fought because we had no choice. The Vrexians forced our hand. Don't let anyone forget that. In his research station, historian Dae-hyun Ko was writing the final chapter of his report. He called it The Price of Ignoring History. The Vrexian Empire fell, he wrote, not because humans were stronger, not because humans had better technology. It fell because the Vrexians made a fundamental mistake. They confused humanity's choice to be peaceful with an inability to be violent. Humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare. They had developed weapons that could destroy planets. They had fought wars that killed tens of millions. And then through tremendous effort and wisdom they had chosen to stop. The Vrexians saw that choice as weakness. They didn't understand that it was strength. The strength to remember what war truly costs. The strength to choose peace even when you're capable of winning any war. When the Vrexians attacked human colonies, they didn't just cross a line. They forced humanity to become something they had been trying very hard not to be anymore. They forced humans to remember that they were very, very good at war. The Vrexian Empire will recover eventually. 6 months after the war ended, Captain Ji-won Kim walked through the memorial gardens on Earth. 16,000 names were carved into black stone, every person who died in the Vrexian attacks. She stopped at one name, Lieutenant Jinho Kang. He had served on the Indomitable for 3 years. He died when a Vrexian missile hit their ship during the first major battle. He was 24 years old. Ji-won touched his name gently. We won, Jinho, she whispered. But it doesn't feel like winning. She had resigned her commission 2 months ago. Admiral Yuna Choi had tried to convince her to stay, but Ji-won was done. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for war while hoping it would never come. When it finally came, she had done what needed to be done. But she didn't want to do it ever again. At the Galactic Council headquarters, Ambassador Minho Park was attending his first session since the war. The atmosphere was completely different from 6 months ago. When he entered the chamber, species that had ignored him before now nodded respectfully. Some even stood as he passed. The Vrexian seats were empty. They had been expelled from the council pending completion of their reparations. Council Speaker Thex called the session to order. We have a proposal before us today, Thex said. Multiple council members have nominated Earth for elevation to Tier 1 status and a permanent seat on the Executive Council. Minho kept his expression neutral. Tier 1 status was reserved for the galaxy's most powerful and influential species. Earth had been Tier 3 just 6 months ago. Does the human ambassador accept this nomination? Thex asked. Minho stood. Earth accepts with conditions. The chamber stirred with surprise. Nobody made conditions when offered Tier 1 status. Our conditions are simple, Minho said. First, the Council must establish clear rules for responding to unprovoked attacks on member species. No more situations where victims are told to negotiate while aggressors face no consequences. Several Council members nodded. Second, Earth wants to establish a military training program for any species that requests it. We'll teach modern combat tactics and strategic thinking. We'll help other species defend themselves. This caused more reaction. Some species looked interested. Others looked nervous. And third, Minho continued, Earth wants it clearly understood that we will respond to future threats decisively. We prefer peace. We will always prefer peace. But if anyone attacks human colonies or our allies, they will face the full force of Earth's military. No warnings, no second chances. The chamber was silent. Thex consulted with the other Council leaders. Finally, he spoke. The Council accepts Earth's conditions. Welcome to Tier 1 status, Ambassador Park. Admiral Yuna Choi stood in Earth's Strategic Defense Command, reviewing the new military structure. The war had taught them many lessons. One was that they needed to stay ready. Admiral, the first class of alien officers has arrived for training, General Sun Mi-han said. 12 species have sent representatives, Yuna nodded. Good. Make sure they understand our doctrine. We don't teach them how to be aggressive. We teach them how to defend themselves effectively. Understood. Also, the monitoring stations in Vrexian space are reporting full compliance. They're sticking to the disarmament agreement. For now, Yuna said, keep watching them. The Vrexians have a long memory. In 50 years, maybe 100, they might try something again. And if they do, then we'll remind them again why attacking humanity is a bad idea. Yan Li, now a commander, stood on the bridge of the Indomitable. He had been promoted to first officer after the war. Captain Ji-won Kim's departure had created a command vacancy, but Hyon had declined the promotion to captain. He wasn't ready for that responsibility yet. The new captain, a veteran named Captain Borum Song, was reviewing patrol routes. Commander, we have a request from the Kelthans, Captain Song said. They want an Earth ship to escort their colony transports through the border region. The Kelthans? Hyun was surprised. That was historian Daehyun Ko's species. Why do they need escorts? They're worried about pirates. Apparently the Vrexian disarmament left a power vacuum. Some groups are taking advantage of it. Hyun nodded. Approve the escort request. Tell the Kelthans we'll be happy to help. This was Earth's new role in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not bullies, but protectors of those who needed protection. On the research station, Daehyun Ko was teaching a class about human history. His students were young beings from various species, all studying to be diplomats or historians. The most important lesson from the Vrexian War, Daehyun said, is understanding the difference between peaceful and harmless. Humans are peaceful. They genuinely prefer negotiation to conflict, but they are not harmless. They are extraordinarily dangerous when forced to fight. A young student raised a tentacle-like appendage. Teacher, why did humans become so good at war? Because they had no choice, Daehyun replied. They evolved on a difficult world. Resources were limited. Different human groups competed constantly. Over thousands of years, they became very efficient at warfare. But they stopped, another student said. Why? Because they got too good at it, Daehyun explained. They developed weapons that could destroy their entire species. They fought wars that killed millions. Eventually, they realized that winning a war didn't matter if everyone died in the process. So they chose peace instead. But the Vrexians didn't understand that? No, Daehyun said sadly. The Vrexians saw that humans had been peaceful for 47 years and assumed they couldn't fight. They didn't realize humans were choosing not to fight. There's a big difference. In the former Vrexian territories, Emperor Vrexis IV dealt with the consequences of his empire's defeat. The Vrexian military was now a fraction of its former size. The economy struggled under the weight of reparations. Many Vrexians were angry, humiliated, bitter. Some called for revenge. Some said that one day the Vrexian Empire would rise again and make humanity pay. But Vrexis had learned his lesson. He had seen what humanity was capable of. He had read the reports from his commanders who survived the war. He had studied human military history. He knew that seeking revenge against humanity would only bring more destruction. Let the young warriors talk about revenge, he told his advisors. Let them plan and scheme. But we will never authorize another attack on human territory. We will fulfill every term of our surrender agreement. We will rebuild slowly and carefully. Your Majesty, one advisor said, the people want to know if the Empire will ever be powerful again. Vrexus looked out the window at his world. Once proud Vrexian cities now guarded by human monitoring stations, perhaps, he said. In 100 years, maybe 200. But never again will we make the mistake of attacking humanity. That lesson cost us too much already. On Earth, in a small house by the ocean, Jiwon Kim was learning to be civilian again. It wasn't easy. She still woke up at dawn. She still thought in terms of tactics and strategy. She still dreamed about space battles. But she was trying. Her former crew sent her messages regularly. Hyun told her about the new captain. Minji sent pictures from her new assignment. Taeyang had retired too and was teaching at a military academy. They had all changed. The war had changed them, but Earth had changed too. The 47 years of patient diplomacy were over. The galaxy now knew what humanity was. The question was whether humanity could stay true to its values while maintaining that reputation. Jiwon hoped they could. She hoped that the war had been a one-time necessity, not the beginning of a new era of human aggression. She hoped that future generations would be able to choose peace, just like her generation had tried to do. But she also hoped that if peace failed again, humanity would be ready. Because the galaxy now understood the truth. Humanity's politeness was always a choice. And if pushed too far, they would make a different choice. Ambassador Minho Park attended a ceremony at the council headquarters. A memorial for all who died in the Vrexian War, both human and Vrexian. As he stood there looking at the names, he thought about the message that had started Earth's military response. Stop attacking or we stop pretending to be polite. It had been meant as a warning. The Vrexians had laughed at it. Now it was the galaxy's reminder. A reminder that humanity had been trying very hard to fit in, to be diplomatic, to solve problems peacefully, but that trying had limits. Minho placed flowers at the memorial. For the humans who died, for the Vrexians who died, for everyone who had been caught up in a war that should never have happened. Peace is a choice, he said quietly, but so is war, and humanity has always been very good at choices. He walked away from the memorial, back to his office, back to the work of keeping that peace alive. Because Earth had learned something from the war too. They had learned that the galaxy needed them, not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as the species willing to do what was necessary when peace failed. It was a heavy responsibility. But humanity had been carrying heavy responsibilities for a long time. They would carry this one too. Far out in space, on the edge of known territory, a new species was making its first tentative steps into galactic society. They were young, curious, eager to meet other species and learn from them. The Galactic Council welcomed them warmly. They explained the rules. They offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges, and they gave one piece of advice spoken by multiple species independently. When you meet humanity,